Sammy. Yeah, Dean? I don't think we're in Kansas anymore. You mean Kansas the state or Kansas the rock band? What? Why would I be talking about the band? Well, you listen to a lot of Kansas. I mean, you must play Carry On Wayward Son at least once a week. Get your head out of your ass, Sam. Obviously, I'm not talking about the band. I think it's a perfectly reasonable question, Dean. I mean, you love classic rock music after all. God, I hate you so much right now. You're just mad because deep down inside, you know that I'm right. I miss Cass. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new, I recommend you check out our introduction video. There's a link to that in the description below, and it'll give you a pretty good sense of what the Horror Movie Syllabus is all about. But in short, we're going to look at a particular subgenre of horror, and then we're going to take a look at 3 movies from that subgenre. Today, the subgenre we're looking at is supernatural horror films. And right off the bat, I know what you're thinking. Aren't pretty much all horror movies supernatural? Aren't most of them supernatural? Yes, you are 100% correct. So there's so many movies that are supernatural in nature for horror. Ghost movies, demon movies, werewolves, vampires, aliens, zombies, whatever. And they all have these supernatural bents to it. So what is the supernatural subgenre supposed to be when all those others are subgenres already? To me, it's kind of a catch-all. It's trying to focus on those movies that kind of fall in the cracks. Movies that don't fit into one of those other subgenres, but are still supernatural in nature. Generally, what I try to focus on are movies where the antagonist in the film isn't easily classified or identified as, say, a ghost or a zombie or whatever, but is clearly a supernatural threat. Just one that we don't really have a word for. So that's what this was supposed to be. And this is admittedly one of those situations that I like to have every once in a while in the syllabus where it's kind of a catch-all overflow type subgenre where I can plug in some movies that didn't quite fit in other subgenres or that I couldn't really get a space for in a particular subgenre, and I could stick it here. I admit it, that is part of what this was. But as I started filling it out when I started doing the syllabus originally, I started to notice that these movies were movies that didn't quite neatly fit into one of the other subgenres. Now, it doesn't mean that the movies we talked about today aren't often considered to fall into another subgenre. In fact, several of the ones we're going to talk about today, people will insist that they are a particular subgenre, a particular type of entity or whatever. I'm going to refute that. I'm going to say that they're not and that they belong here. And people can take or leave my opinion on that, but that's the way we're going to go with this. We're basically focusing today on horror antagonists that are clearly supernatural but don't neatly fit into one of the other subgenres or one of the other kind of entities or monsters or whatever. So that's what we're trying to do, and I think it'll become clear as we are going through the movies. I think you'll start to understand what it is we're talking about as we go through the movies. To that end, we are going to categorize the movies as undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate level, like we always do. And in this case, they're going to go in the increasing level of deep cut or decreasing level of mainstream popularity, because something that Sarah, aka the Rose Bride, in the comments has been doing when she gives her recommendations. So I figured I'd give it a try. So we're going in order of deep cut today in honor of Sarah. So with that, why don't I stop talking about it and start showing you what I mean with these supernatural horror movies? The first supernatural horror movie we're talking about today, the undergraduate level selection, is Final Destination. Final Destination came out in 2000. It was a surprise hit and has endured not only with several sequels, but also just has a enduring popularity amongst horror fans, a popularity that I think is well-deserved and well-earned. If you're not familiar with the movie follows a group of people that were going to go on a plane to France for a school trip, and they get off the plane when one of them has a premonition of the plane crashing and everybody dying. They get off the plane and his premonition comes true, but now death wants them to get killed because they were supposed to die in that plane, and they cheated death. And so death is coming up with creative ways to reclaim them for death. uh, and we'll leave it there. We won't go too deep into the details of it and the specifics of it because I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it, but many of you have. It was a pretty popular movie when it came out. It was a big hit, and like I said, it spawned many sequels. And it was a hit for a reason. The reason is it's just a lot of fun. What Final Destination managed to do is take the fun of the slasher movie without the actual slasher. So it's got the fun, gory kills and the fun suspense, but without an actual physical being with a knife or axe or machete or whatever chasing people around and killing them. Instead, it's got this vague entity of death that is enacting revenge for these people cheating death by escaping the plane crash, the plane accident, which I think is a really neat idea. I think it's a neat idea of people were supposed to die, and so the cosmic scales are trying to be balanced by reclaiming those people and making sure they died because they weren't supposed to live. I love that concept. I think it's really neat, and I love the idea of death as a concept, as an entity, not as a person, not as a hooded figure with a scythe or whatever, but an actual like force of nature, kind of. And as a result, what happens is, you've got like this invisible entity that is killing people by setting up all of these precarious situations that are potentially lethal. It becomes like this movie full of Rube Goldberg style traps that you see all these different potential ways that somebody's going to die. The question is how. You know they're going to die. How are they going to die? Which one of these 8 different things that have been set up to kill them is going to be the one that finally gets them? What combination of things are going to fall into place to lead to their demise? It becomes a lot of fun. It becomes a very tense and suspenseful situation. As somebody walks into a situation, say a bathroom or whatever, and you start to see all the little things that are going wrong that could wind up being dangerous, and then you start trying to guess what's going to happen. And then I would say most of the time you don't quite guess because it winds up being pretty elaborate, pretty ridiculous, and a lot of fun. Really gory, shocking amounts of gore in the movie. Fun gore, you know what I mean? It's a blast of a movie. Like I said, I don't want to go into the specific kills too much to give you examples. I'm probably showing clips of them right now, but that's the biggest fun of the movie is how people die and what happens to them. It really is like the crux of the movie, and it made for a very simple franchise to franchise out because each movie just kept doing more of the same, and for the most part, with satisfying results. More of the same was what the audience wanted, what's what I wanted, and for the most part, with the possible exception of part 4, worked out rather well. You would think that the premise is a little thin, and you wouldn't be wrong. Apparently, it was actually a spec script for an X-Files episode. It's supposed to be like one episode of the X-Files, and in fact was directed by one of the creators of the X-Files. So it makes some sense that it's kind of a thin concept, but it didn't need to be a deep concept because you had the centerpiece of your action, which was the kills. The creative kills were the centerpiece. The story just had to get you enough information to get to the next kill. That said, the story is, like I said, it's interesting. The interesting concept of death chasing down people that escaped and people trying to find a way to cheat death, and the rules or whatever that the death follows in terms of trying to reclaim people. It's kind of fun, and it allows you to play along with the game and work out how you would try to survive. It's a lot of fun in that sense, and I think it works out rather well. It also helps that, especially for the first one, the cast is strong. It's a bunch of names that are probably recognizable in the late 90s, early 2000s. Devon Sawa, Ali Larder, Kerr Smith, but they're good in the movie. They play their characters well. They really make a lot of sense in their roles and bring their characters to life. There is also Tony Todd in the movie. We love Tony Todd. We love Tony Todd. He's a legend. He's a god amongst horror fans. So he plays the mysterious coroner in the movie. I won't go too much into it. Suffice to say, Tony Todd steals every scene that he's in. He's not in it much, but he's awesome, of course. But again, the real centerpiece of the movie is death. It's fun to try to guess how people are going to die. It's fun to see the idea of how people are going to die being played out by the audience and the characters as they start getting paranoid and trying to figure out things that could potentially kill them and start trying to avoid those things. And we, as the audience, are trying to guess which of those things are going to finally get them. It's a fun game. It's a game that you can play along. It feels like almost interactive in that sense. And again, all of the other movies follow suit, and they're all really good with the exception of part four, the 3D one, which is that was a little subpar. Each one of the movies starts with a really epic opening, like mass death disaster that is really impressively filmed. Part two in particular has a really good one. Part four is like a NASCAR one, and it's not as good as the other ones. But there are five parts of the movie, so there's four sequels, and the fifth one is fantastic in my opinion, and ends really well. Quite literally brings the whole series full circle for me. I don't want to spoil it too much, but if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about, and it's a really fun way to wrap up the series to the point where as much as I enjoy the series, I think it's a lot of fun and it has legs. I kind of hope they don't revisit it because I think they have wrapped it up extremely well. If you haven't seen this franchise, I would check it out. At least the first one. If you don't like the first one, the rest are not going to be for you because it's more of the same. But if you enjoy the first one, check them all out. You'll have a lot of fun. But the movie is fun. Again, it's a gore fest. That's the primary drive of it. It's like seeing people die in gory ways and just kind of being like, ooh, and all that. So that's what it's. So if it's not your bag, that's not your bag. You know what I mean? If gore is not your thing, Final Destination you can skip. But if you like that or if you don't mind it, they're fun movies. They're not trying to do more than they are. They're not trying to be deeper than what they are. They know what they are. They know what the audience is looking for, and they deliver it time and time again. I'm a big fan of the franchise. I think the first one is excellent. I think the second one is on par with that. The third one's pretty great. The fourth one kind of sucks. And then the fifth one is excellent. So I 4 out of the 5, I like quite a bit. So high recommend for Final Destination. What do you think of them? I bet you a lot of you have seen them. What do you think of them? I'm a pretty effusive about them, of course, but what do you think of them? Do you like them? Do you think they're okay? Do you hate them? Do you think they're not worth your time? Are they garbage? Let us know in the comments below. But if you haven't seen Final Destination, check out the first one and then tell me what your favorite part was afterwards. Come back in the comments and tell me what your favorite part was because I have a feeling I could probably guess. There's like 3 or 4 parts I think I'd guess on. So hopefully you'll take me up on that. But Final Destination, high recommend for me. Go check it out. The second supernatural horror movie we're talking about today, the graduate level selection, is It Follows. It Follows came out in 2014 and kind of caught the horror world off guard and set us on fire for a little bit because it really made an impression as something fresh and original and really intriguing. Is it really all of those things? We'll talk about it in just a second. But if you haven't seen it, the story is about a girl who has sex with her boyfriend, who immediately, literally dumps her after that, but explains to her that he has now passed on to her a kind of a death curse where she's going to be stalked and killed by this entity that takes on the appearance of other people, both living and dead, people you know, people you don't know, but will slowly follow you until it gets you, unless you have sex with somebody else and pass it on to them. It's a fascinating premise for a movie, and I won't go any further into the details of the movie, of course, not spoil it, but it is a very interesting premise. It is quite literally a monster STD because it's passed on through sex. And the idea of the monster seemingly having no shape or form of its own, but rather taking the form of other people, not only makes it very mysterious, but also, and therefore scarier, but also lends itself to some fun moments in the movie where both the characters and you are getting paranoid about the people in the background. Are one of those people the monster? Is that your friend or is that the monster? It's a wonderful way to build tension and suspense in the movie, and it works extremely well. Now, I said when I first started talking about the movie, that it was very fresh and original, caught the world on storm and everything. And I question, is that really accurate? The reason I said that is not because of the idea or the concept of the narrative, because I think that is all true. It is accurate. It is very fresh and original and interesting. I say it because of the filming style. The filming style feels not original, but rather a huge homage to John Carpenter. in particular John Carpenter's 1978 classic Halloween. The movie is shot Carpenter style. The synth score feels very Carpenter-esque. And so you could argue that's not super original. They're kind of aping John Carpenter. And to that I say, yes, so what? Because A, Carpenter's awesome. B, this movie does it so well. It feels so cool. I really like the way that they put this together. I like that they did that kind of style where they kind of shot it in this 80s Carpenter-esque slow burn, slow pan, synth score driven style. It works incredibly well. A, because that's a great style to use for this kind of story. It was very effective for building up the dread. But B, because this movie goes through great pains to not set itself into one time period. There are cars from all kinds of different eras in the movie. The technology is sometimes dated and sometimes very modern or possibly even futuristic. Like you have like old tube televisions that they're watching, and they're watching old movies on old tube televisions. But then the girls are also using an e-reader that's shaped like a seashell, which I've never seen before. So it's all over the map. What year is this set in? It's intentionally vague or discombobulated, if you will. It's really trying to not be set in one time period, but rather be timeless. And in that sense, it's very effective. And so using older filming techniques, Carpenter-esque film styling, along with modern film techniques, just enhances that timelessness all the more. Very effective, very creative, very clever. If you couldn't guess from my tone, I absolutely love It Follows. I think it's fantastic. This movie knocked me off my feet when I saw it. I didn't know what to expect when I checked it out, but people were buzzing about it, so I had to go check it out. And I was so blown away by this in the best possible way. It really impressed me. Again, it felt extremely fresh and original. I felt like I hadn't seen anything like this before. The acting was quite good. Micah Monroe, who plays Jay, the main character, is something of a budding screen queen. She is in a few other movies. The Guest comes to mind off the top of my head. She's excellent. She's an excellent actress. She really carries this film. She is somebody you really connect with and relate to, and you could have quite easily not related to her, especially because there's certain moments in the film where she does some things that you could theoretically just kind of turn on her, but because she's so good and so likable, you kind of connect with her. Keir Gilchrist is also in the show. He's excellent as her best friend Paul. And if you ever watch the show Atypical on Netflix, he's the main character on that. He's excellent in that show. He's a great actor. But everybody's bringing A games here. All the friends feel very realistic. They feel very natural, and that adds a lot to the movie. Watching the characters find their way or navigate their way through this dilemma is really the best part of the movie. They're sitting there trying to come up with ideas, and you in your head are trying to come up with ideas that would work for you as well. I mean, you're given the rules, you've had sex with somebody who had this. Now this entity is going to chase you, but it's going to chase you slowly. It doesn't move quickly, but it won't stop. So what do you have to do? You can either give it to somebody else through sex, or you can run, but it will eventually catch up to you. If you stop moving, it will catch up to you. And so you're kind of given those parameters, and you have to think to yourself, well, what would I do? And that was actually one of the fun things about the movie. In talking about it with others after the fact, trying to figure out how you would address the problem. What would you do to try to keep yourself safe? Ultimately realizing that all you'd be doing at some point is delaying things rather than actually solving the problem. And in the meantime, it would be having a severe impact on your life. That's horrific. That's a horrific thing, and it's also one of those movies that kind of sticks with you, keeps you talking about it after the fact. And I love those kind of movies. So, It Follows was a huge success for me, and it was a huge success critically as well. People love the movie. I know they've talked about doing sequels stuff like that. I really hope they don't, because they leave it that follows you so undefined and so vague that that's very effective and scary. And if you go back and explain the origins of it, it's going to deflate it. Just like every movie monster. You give us the origins, you show us too much, you peek behind the curtain, you will defang it. And so I hope that they don't do that. As much as I like the movie, I don't want to see a sequel. I don't want to see it diminished by an explanation of what it is. The movie stands alone on its own. It doesn't need another sequel. It's an excellent piece of filmmaking. The ending is a little bit weak, only because some of the CGI at the very end is a little suspect, and there's some questions about it. But that's a minor nitpick to what I think is otherwise a modern day classic. I think it's an excellent film, an incredibly well made. It's an excellent film because of the idea and the execution of that idea. very fresh and original, very well made. Perfect combination, and sprinkling some excellent acting performances on top. It's a fabulous film. So if you haven't seen it, it's a good ride, man. Check it out. It's pretty creepy, pretty intense, and a lot of fun. And if you have seen it, let me know what you think. How would you escape it? Let us know in the comments below if you've seen the movie and you understand the rules and how it works. How would you escape it? What would be your plan? Let's debate whether or not your plan would work. But if you haven't seen It Follows, definitely check it out. And the last movie that we're talking about today, the postgraduate level supernatural horror film, is Pontypool. Pontypool came out in 2008, and it's a Canadian horror movie, and it is maybe the only linguistic horror movie I've ever seen in my entire life, and that is fascinating, and I love it because of that. If you're not familiar with Pontypool, the story takes place in the town of Pontypool in Canada, and it takes place mostly in this one location of a radio station where a radio disc jockey who's kind of an abrasive personality and his crew, are his producer and their assistant, are trapped while some sort of outbreak is taking place outside, and things are going weird and people are kind of going insane, and they're trying to figure out what's happening and what they can do about it. And to say anything more than that would be a travesty because honestly, kind of like the less you know about this movie, maybe the better. Because I didn't know much about it other than apparently it's really good. And I went and checked it out and I loved this movie. I love this movie. And it seems like people who are familiar with it really love the movie. Now, it's not super well known. It's kind of why I picked it as the deep cut here. It's not as popular as mainstream as, say, Final Destination, for example. Horror fans seem to know it though, and I have yet to come across somebody who didn't like it, which is actually surprising. I bet you there are people out there that don't like it very much because it's not necessarily for everybody. It's a very high concept horror movie. It's for the intelligent, man. It's got some deep ideas and concepts that are not simplistic and really require some thought behind them. That said, even if that's not your bag, even if it's not something you want to do too much thinking on a horror movie, this movie will still deliver because it's got enough scares, it's got enough tension built in, it's got enough gore. Even though it's light on that stuff, it's got enough of it to probably keep you engaged. It's still a compelling enough story that I don't think you'll tune out just because it gets pretty intellectual as things go on. The cast is game. They're really good, and that's key because there's only a handful of them, and we're not shifting locations. Normally, that's a recipe for disaster. It's normally the kind of thing where the movie's going to get kind of dull. It's going to be more like a play and talky and not a lot of action happening. Not the case here. The performances kind of mask the fact that you're not shifting locations so well, and then there's enough mystery going on and enough incidents popping up to keep things moving along at a nice pace, and you'll never get bored. I'd be surprised if you got bored. The resolution of what's going on though is the thing that I'm talking about. It's so interesting, and without spoiling things too much, it focuses a lot on language and how we use it, and different languages, and what that means, and it opens up a lot of questions and a lot of things. There's some themes being tickled here. I don't know that they're being fully explored, but they're being tickled here that have to do with nationality and communication and expression, really deep and interesting stuff that we could go down a rabbit hole on. And I'd be happy to go down that rabbit hole because it's fascinating stuff and it's far more interesting than the average horror film. Now, on that note, I have seen a lot of people describe Pontypool as a zombie movie, a really good zombie movie. In fact, right here on the case, if you look, it says one of the best zombie films ever made. Pontypool is not a zombie movie. Okay, it's not a zombie movie for the simple reason that zombies are people that die and come back from the dead, and that's not what's happening in Pontypool, and that's why it's here in the supernatural horror subgenre and not in the zombie subgenre because it's not a zombie film. And like I said at the beginning of the video, people tend to try to sometimes categorize or identify these kind of unidentifiable supernatural monsters in certain movies. They'll try to say, well, that's a ghost, or that's a that's demon, or in this case, that's a zombie. But it's not a zombie. It's not. That's not what's happening here. It's very similar in style and tone and concept to what you would see in a zombie movie. But again, I can't spoil it. But trust me, it's not a zombie movie. It's not. And so that's why I like it. If it was a zombie movie, it'd be a damn good zombie movie, but it's not a zombie movie, and that's what makes it all the better. The fact that it's not a zombie movie is what is the best part about this movie. But again, just tell you more than that would be spoiling it, so I don't want to do that. Um, there is apparently a sequel in the works, or apparently there was a spinoff. I have not seen the spinoff, and I don't really want there to be a sequel. I like this movie standing alone as the way it is. I don't want to see more. I don't want to see more of an explanation. Kind of like with its follows, the less said, the better. This works out really good the way it is. I mean, I'm open to being wrong, being proven wrong. I'm open to them showing me something more that I didn't expect and impressing me once again, because this caught me off guard. Potentially they could do it again, but I'm wary of it. I'm wary of them being able to catch lightning in a bottle twice. It would be a challenge. So I would rather never see that sequel come to light. And I'm reluctant to watch the spinoff, even though I don't think the spinoff has much to do with the actual narrative of this one. But that's where I kind of stand on it. But the original Pontypool is a fantastic movie. It's really, really fascinating. It's really interesting. It's a fresh and original idea. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it before or since, in terms of what the solution or the impetus, the driving force of the movie is. Fascinating movie. So if you haven't seen Pontypool, and probably a lot of you haven't, high recommend for Pontypool. Just go and dive in and check it out and let me know what you think. So that's going to do it for our exploration into supernatural horror films. But we have as always, a few extra credit movies for you to delve into, other movies that kind of maybe fall in the cracks and don't neatly fit into other subgenres. So with that, let's jump into those. The first one that I'm going to mention is a movie called Boogeyman. And Boogeyman came out in the mid 2000s, and it was a movie about a young boy who watched his father get killed by the boogeyman as a child, literally come out of the closet and killing his dad. And then as an adult, kind of goes back to confront those fears and save other children from the neighborhood, from the boogeyman. And I'm gonna be honest, it's kind of a throwaway movie. It's kind of cheesy. It's got that very 2000s feel to it. But I kind of love it. And I love it probably because, and I didn't realize this at the time, I didn't realize this till years later, but it's written, or at least co-written, by Eric Kripke, who is the creator of the show Supernatural, which I love, as you might have told, but from the intro to this video. And so it feels kind of like an expanded version of an episode of Supernatural, which to me is a good thing. So I really enjoy this movie, even though I recognize that it's kind of trash. It's not a brilliant piece of art or anything like that. It is competently made, and it's got decent actors, people who are probably not so famous now, Barry Watson and Emily Deschanel, but they're good. They're good in the movie, and I liked them at the time. But it really is that Eric Kripke connection that probably is driving my affection for the movie. That said, I want to be manage expectations. It's not an amazing film. I enjoy the movie. They've got like 4 sequels, and I haven't bothered to check out the sequels. Like, it's not so great that I'm like, I'm a huge fan of the Boogeyman franchise. Like, I'm not. I have them all. I just haven't watched them yet. So do with that information what you will. But Boogeyman's a fun, diversion. It's not going to make you mad. You're not going to be angry that you wasted your life on it. But it's also not going to change your religion either. So it's a fun, good time. And so I figured I'd mention it here. The next extra credit movie we're going to talk about is Lights Out. And Lights Out came out in around 2016 or so, and was based on a short film. It was an expanded version of a short film that kind of got a lot of buzz on it. And if you haven't seen it, basically it deals with this creature entity that can only appear in the dark, and when you turn the lights on, it vanishes, it disappears. It can't go into the light, but when you turn the lights off, you can see it, which is a fun premise and makes for an excellent short film. It's really creepy. It's a really neat effect. It's a really good gag, and it makes for a really creepy setup that doesn't really sustain for a full 90-minute movie, to be honest with you. Uh, the full movie felt the need to give a lot of backstory to explain everything, much to its detriment. And that's kind of been a theme of this video, inadvertently or unexpectedly, that the more you try to explain the supernatural, the less scary it becomes. And that's a little bit of the problem here. That's it. It's a valiant effort to try to take a short film and turn it into a full-length movie by giving it some backstory, giving it a reason for existing, giving it some context and stuff. And it's not a bad story. Like the idea that they came up with to kind of flesh all of this out, pretty good. Like, it's not bad at all. It's just, like I said, it's scarier when you know less about it. Like, the opening scene of the movie, which I think is it kind of parallels the short, is fantastic, and then the rest of the movie kind of gets into like some mystery stuff where you're trying to uncover the mystery of this entity, and it's rote. It's not bad by any imagination. If you're not a super discerning horror fan, you'll have a good time with it, but it's not revolutionary or anything like that. So while it's not treading any new ground, it's also not, it's not doing anything to really annoy you either. That said, I really thought the ending was fantastic. I won't spoil it, of course, but the ending, I didn't see the ending coming, and it had some guts for it, man. Like, they really went there with the ending. So the ending really elevated the movie for me as a whole. So like I said, the concept of the setup is great. The ending is great. The middle is okay. It's got Maria Bello in it. She's fantastic. They don't give her much to do in the movie, but all the other actors are good in the movie too. So it's well made. It's well shot. There's nothing wrong with the movie at all. But great setup that can't be sustained for 90 minutes. But a slap the face ending that really works really well, salvages the movie and makes it, to me, noteworthy enough to at least mention here's an extra credit. And the last movie that we're going to talk about today for extra credit is a movie called The Entity. And The Entity came out in the early 80s and is something of a controversial movie at the time and probably still now, except that it's not necessarily as well known now. And if you haven't seen it, The Entity is a story about a woman who is being repeatedly sexually and physically assaulted by an entity, an invisible force that can't be seen, and her struggles to be taken seriously about this and be helped and solve the issue. And what's interesting about this movie is that it is based on a novel, which is in turn based on an actual case. Now, I'm not saying that the events are actually real, but a woman reported this, and this was investigated back in the 70s in Los Angeles. And you can look this up, again, starting Wikipedia and work your way down, and you can find all the information. And it's pretty fascinating stuff, especially if you believe in the paranormal. Pretty interesting stuff. But the idea of this being a real story and then being translated into a movie is an intriguing one because it's hard to say what the intent of the movie is. Now, in my research, I would say that the filmmakers were attempting to be respectful and portray something in a respectful light and not be exploitative or mocking of the subject matter of the movie. Now, they didn't actually work with that person. They just made a movie of the book. They didn't actually work or meet with the actual woman, but they were trying to make something not cheesy and exploitative and nasty and whatever. Whether or not they succeeded is a matter for debate. The movie is a little bit graphic. There's a couple scenes in there, scenes of sexual assault that are a little disturbing, but they're also borderline ridiculous because it's like an invisible assailant. So what you have is star Barbara Hershey, who gives an impressive performance, basically writhing around and being attacked and everything like that, like just kind of just throwing herself around and stuff like that. And it's a testament to her performance that you don't laugh because it should be silly. But she's so good in the role that you don't laugh, and it winds up being disturbing. It winds up being effective. That and these special effects, which I believe were done by Stan Winston, are really lend itself to making the scenes really really creepy. Like the sexual assault scenes, when you do see stuff, the special effects of like her body being touched and manipulated and stuff like that, it's fascinating. And if you owe it to yourself to, if you're interested, to look up how they did that because it's pretty cool. And it's for the most part it holds up really, really well, even though it's like 30 years old. 40 years old now. Geez, I'm getting old. Like 40-year-old technology and effects, but they hold up remarkably well. Really, really fantastic. So there's a lot to like about this movie, but there's also a lot to question because, what you're talking about is, a movie about a woman getting sexually assaulted by, what a lot of people call a ghost. Not a ghost because it doesn't really operate or act like a ghost does. And if you follow enough ghost movies, you'd see the difference. But does that seem exploitative? Like there's nudity in this movie. They show some of the sexual assaults. Is that exploitation? Maybe. I'll take the filmmakers at their word. That's not the intent of it, but it kind of comes off that way a little bit. But it also is deeply unsettling and winds up being the crux of what makes the movie grab you and makes you invest in it. So, kind of take it or leave it. But I think the movie in recent years has gotten a better reputation because it's also a portrayal of a woman kind of fighting to be heard. And I think our modern sensibilities, as opposed to 1982, are much more receptive to this message and much more focused on empowered women. A large part of this movie is actually kind of a drama of this woman trying to be taken seriously by the doctors and scientists who are investigating her case, and just kind of getting stonewalled and belittled and ignored and kind of almost vilified. People kind of saying it's kind of like her and stuff like that, and people telling her she's crazy and stuff like that, kind of gaslighting her and whatnot. It's a fascinating lens to look through it now and see that, because it resonates very well with women in general, especially people victims of sexual assault now, and their struggle to be taken seriously and be protected and be helped. It's themes that still resonate today. Again, 40 years later, and it probably actually resonates even more now than it did then. So while I think that the movie is might have in the time, and in fact I know at the time the movie was kind of decried as being maybe offensive or not appropriate or something like that. I think the public opinion on it has swayed a bit, and now it's more it kind of has a message to it that is empowering. And I'd say the ending of the movie really resonates with that too. So if it's a movie that you've kind of been reluctant to watch because of the subject matter and you're worried that it's exploitation, I would say that while that might be somewhat true, overall the movie winds up being incredibly powerful, really empowering, and sends a really great positive message overall. Now, whether or not you believe the original story is true, I'll leave that to you. I don't know. My opinions on the paranormal and stuff like that, I kind of shrug my shoulders at it. I haven't seen anything to make me think it's true. I haven't seen anything to definitely say it's false. So I'm kind of ambivalent about the whole thing. I don't know if this woman was right or wrong. I don't know what reason she'd have to lie, but I also don't know enough of the facts of the case to really have an opinion on that. But I do think it made for an excellent movie that has kind of gotten lost over the years, but I think the people that have watched it now are starting to get like a better reputation and maybe being seen as something of an important movie. So I wanted to bring it to your attention in case you weren't familiar with it. If you haven't seen it, I've given you an idea of what it's about. You can decide for yourself whether or not that's something you're interested in seeing, but I definitely think it's an important enough film to bring up here. So that's going to do it for this week's video. We've taken a look into the supernatural horror and hopefully save some movies from falling within the cracks and not making it into the syllabus and one of the other subgenres. And that was kind of the whole purpose of this subgenre. It's also just, an excuse to get movies I really like in here. I tend to like these supernatural movies where the antagonist or the villain is kind of hard to explain. You can't just explain it away. It's not an easily solvable riddle. It's something that you wind up discussing and debating after the fact. Those are the movies I tend to like. I think a lot of us tend to want to like categorize or label everything, and that's why there's a push to like do things like call Pontypool a zombie film, for example, or call The Entity a ghost film, when it really isn't. Actually, I think that's just a reaction that we have, that we want to label these things. And honestly, if you've ever looked at the horror movie syllabus, the actual syllabus itself, you'll see I'm as guilty of it as anybody, trying to categorize things and put things into boxes. So it's nice to every once in a while just kind of accept that that's not always the case, and that sometimes things don't fit neatly into a box, and just like maybe create a different box for it, or just address it anyways. I hope that you found that exploration interesting. I hope that you found these movies interesting, and if there's some that you haven't seen, I hope you found some gems to check out. As always, leave in the comments some additional supernatural horror movies that you think missed getting talked about here, so we can all check them out. I appreciate your guys' input in that level, and I've been really enjoying your comments. So thanks in advance for that, because I appreciate you guys very, very much. So until next time, class dismissed.